For nearly 70 years, Godzilla has been an icon of cinema, with each iteration of the character being unique from the others. In the original 1954 film, he was the living embodiment of nuclear war, but throughout the years he shifted into other roles and personalities, such as a force of the planet keeping the balance in check, a constantly evolving god of destruction, a protector of Earth, and even an apocalyptic interdimensional being capable of bending space and time. Each iteration of the titular kaiju has demonstrated various feats of abilities and power, and with the newly evolved and more powerful Godzilla set to appear in the next entry of the Monsterverse, I wanted to talk about one of the most powerful incarnations of the King of the Monsters. Hello my co-hosts, hope you're all doing well. I'm your host Tyrannosenpai, and welcome to today's video, which is the first of a series of videos on Godzilla. While Godzilla's main claim to fame has been in the form of films, he's also made various appearances in video games, novels, toy lines, and comics, which is the topic of this particular video and this series. His first ever comic series was Godzilla King of the Monsters, that was published by Marvel Comics in 1977 and ran for 24 issues. From what I found, this series seemed to be quite a success, albeit occasionally being on the more ridiculous side in some moments. Ever since, Godzilla has appeared in various comics from various publishers. One such publisher is IDW. For those of you who don't know, IDW is among one of the biggest American comic book publishers, and they mainly focus on making comics from well-known IPs like Sonic the Hedgehog, G.I. Joe, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, just to name a few. In 2010, IDW secured a licensing deal with Toho for Godzilla and his foes and allies, and released their first comic series in the franchise in 2011. And it's that very comic series that is the topic of today's video, Godzilla Kingdom of Monsters. No, not King of the Monsters, Kingdom of Monsters. Kingdom of Monsters is the first part of a trilogy commonly known as the IDW Godzilla Trilogy. It ran for a total of 12 issues from March 2011 to February 2012, and was written by Eric Powell, Tracy March, and, forgive me if I say this wrong, Jason Ciaramella, and penciled by Phil Hester and Victor Santos. From what I've seen, there aren't a lot of discussions about the first installment of the trilogy, and the ones I have found seem to be relatively negative. Why is that exactly? Well, let's take a look at it and find out. The comic begins in Japan, where a boy and a girl are playing on a beach surrounded by dead fish. All things seem normal until a huge tail erupts from the sea and rows of teeth emerge from underground before Godzilla rises from the sand and holy shit! Yeah, Godzilla in this comic doesn't look all that good to me, in my opinion. There are quite a lot of panels in this comic where Godzilla looks less like his typical self and more like a human or an Aztec curse that's been placed upon your entire household. And on that note, I honestly don't know if this design is based on any existing Godzilla suits, or this is meant to be the artist's take on the monster. And it's not just Godzilla that I don't like the looks of. A majority of the kaiju designs just don't look good to me. Also, how did Godzilla manage to eat these kids? You can clearly see it's his bottom jaw, and yet the rest of his head is buried in the sand. Since when could Godzilla open his mouth wider than a 100-degree angle? I don't know, man. Either way, I'm not a fan of the kaiju designs in this series, or the science behind how he pulled this off. Anyway, after eating the kids, Godzilla makes landfall and goes on a rampage, battling the Japanese military. After their tanks and planes fail to bring the monster down, the Prime Minister decides to use nuclear force, using a submarine to launch the weapon, and it lands a direct hit on Godzilla. With the monster seemingly destroyed, this would normally be a time to celebrate, but we as Godzilla fans know better than that. Unfortunately, the military's attempt at killing Godzilla not only failed, but the nuclear blast also gave Godzilla the ability to use his signature atomic breath. With his new power, Godzilla resumes his destruction into Tokyo. We then travel to America, where President Obama, Ogden, sees the attack on the television. So I just want to say a couple of things before we continue, since we've just finished talking about the first issue. The first and glaring thing to me is the art style. I honestly do not like the art in this comic. I feel like the shading is too dark, and I think the outlines are very jagged. I also don't like a lot of the character designs. The second thing I want to bring up is that there is a constant theme of people making rather unintelligent decisions in an attempt to destroy the monsters. I'll give the nuclear blast one a pass, because no one really knew that all it would do is power up Godzilla. But I can't say the same thing about what's to come. While Godzilla continues his attack on Japan, we go to Moscow where a class field trip is underway. The trip, however, is cut short by an earthquake, and in the chaos, one of the students decides to make the brilliant decision to steal a meteorite that had fallen out of its container while hundreds of birds fall from the sky, dead. After the boy gets home with the stolen artifact, the meteorite is revealed to be an egg, as a tiny rodent hatches from it. The monster pterosaur proceeds to grow at an accelerated rate, eating the boy's pets, and the boy himself, before bursting from the roof and taking flight. See, kids? Let's be a lesson to never steal. We then hop over to Mexico, where we see a herd of cattle that mysteriously died. Okay, so I'm going to make another insert here, but in case you didn't notice, there is an ongoing occurrence that has been happening in this comic series. It seems that whenever a new kaiju is about to make an appearance, animals die in their thousands. I honestly have no idea why this is, and as far as I know, it's never explained. I like foreshadowing, but I like to have information other than a new kaiju is coming. Anyway, two cowboys are thrown off their horses as Anguirus finally appears, making his way to the Texas-Mexico border. In an attempt to halt the monster's approach, the mayor builds a wall, but unfortunately for him, he and the engineers clearly forgot that they were dealing with a multi-story sized kaiju, and Anguirus proceeds to completely demolish the wall, probably killing all the people working in the machinery. Oh, and the father of the two kids from the beach in issue 1 straps himself to explosives and detonates himself on Godzilla's nose, but it doesn't do anything. We are then introduced to two new characters, Minette and Mallory. Seemingly mute, they are being transferred over to a new school in France after causing issues in their previous school. These two girls are going to be important to remember, so keep it in mind as we continue. One of the kids from their class accidentally hits one of the twins with a soccer ball, and they took it personally, as they used their psychic powers to traumatize the boy with images of a xenomorph wannabe. That's right, folks, they're psychic. And not too long afterwards, the two of them discover a giant egg. In the United Nations headquarters, Kenjo Ando introduces the newly named monsters to the world. Now, Ando doesn't have much of a role in Kingdom of Monsters, but he would make a bigger appearance later in the trilogy. Godzilla also arrives at the Korean demilitarized zone and attacks North Korea, but who cares? It's clearly only there as a joke. We then tune in to a Lady Gaga performance as she is singing Bad Romance. A girly Yaya performance as she's singing I Want Your Sweatpants dressed in a Godzilla costume to promote animal rights of the kaiju. I honestly do not like this character, and if I'm going to be honest, I'm not a fan of the music star she's based on. After a Korean rapper calls him a racist against Asians on live TV, President Ogston is informed about the giant egg that was found in France and continues his efforts to track all of the monsters. Also, Anguirus kills a pair of stereotypical rednecks that thought they could kill him with a rifle. But should we really be surprised or care? Meanwhile, in Times Square, girly Yaya hosts a rally to prevent the egg destruction in France. Not much to say here. Back in France, swarms of insects suddenly appear and immediately die as the military attempts to destroy the egg. But before they concede, Minette and Mallory use their psychic powers to kill off all the soldiers, and the egg hatches, revealing it to be Batra. And I'll be real with you guys, Batra is actually one of the few designs in this comic that are actually really good. It looks very faithful to the original props that were used in a standalone film appearance. See, I could give this comic a compliment. What I won't compliment is the fact that it's now taken 4 issues to finally meet the lead character, Sergeant Stephen Woods. And it's especially bad because there's a 3-week flashback to when he gets his Medal of Honor and sees the report of Godzilla attacking Japan. Honestly, why was he introduced so late into the series? He's supposedly the main character we're meant to follow, and yet he doesn't appear until a quarter into the comic. And unfortunately, I think it worked against his character from the start. Right from the start, we know that Woods isn't exactly a people person, only really caring about his family while only seeing the evil of humanity. I'm honestly one to talk because I'm not exactly a big fan of a majority of people, but not to the degree that is portrayed here. Jumping back to the present and away from the main lead, Minette and Mallory use Batra to fight against the French military, bent on domination. Back in America, Woods gives his take on a subject I honestly don't want to talk about, as a morning show starts an interview with a film cast from an upcoming film at Jersey Field, only for him to change the channel to news reports detailing the current whereabouts of all the monsters that have been sighted around the world. Minette and Mallory crown themselves as queens of France, but like any pair of spoiled little girls, they want real crowns and jewels, so they leave a recently cocooned Batra to get the real jewels. Back in Los Angeles, the city is under evacuation as Godzilla makes landfall and makes his way to Anguirus, who has just left San Antonio. The two monsters meet, and once again, the people make very unintelligent theories about how they're allies, and only double back when the kaiju start to fight each other. In the chaos, Woods attempts to rescue his mother, but she is unfortunately killed under a pile of rubble. Within the debris, the Jersey Field cast seem to have survived the initial destruction, trapped in a limo hanging in one of the buildings, and beg for Woods to help, only for him to walk away and lead them to their fates as they're caught in the crossfires of Godzilla's atomic breath. Godzilla defeats Anguirus and then leaves. In the White House, President Ogden signs off on a missile launch using poisonous gas to kill the now weakened Anguirus in an attempt to finally kill him. We'll get to see how that worked out later. We then travel to Pasadena, where we meet another of our main leads, a little girl named Allie. She and her family pack up their belongings and proceed to evacuate from their home. Back in the Louvre, Minette and Mallory kill more of the French military and steal monarch treasures, which they decide to show off to a still cocooned Batra. Two survivors of the previous battle find girly Yaya's dead body, make another stupid pop joke, and unfortunately get caught up in the gas deployed against Anguirus. Unfortunately for the military, they decided to use a low-hanging gas and learned that Anguirus could actually stand up on his hind legs. Should have taken that into account when thinking of the possibilities. The German military decides to do the exact opposite tactic and use lighter gas to kill Rodin, who had just arrived after attacking Russia. Now, let me ask you guys something. They intend to release the gas into the sky as Rodin is airborne. Bear in mind that Rodin is a giant pterosaur, a flying reptile with massive wings. What do you think is going to happen? Well, I'll tell you what happens. He fucking flaps his wings and sends the gas away from him and onto the soldiers on the ground. I swear to God, there is one functional brain cell within all the military personnel all around the world, and it's being shared by every single one of them. And the civilians aren't faring well either, as Allie and her family start having problems with people stealing their food and water while in a traffic jam. As Allie's father gets in a fistfight with one of the offenders, Godzilla appears and lays waste, crushing cars underfoot and blasting vehicles with his atomic breath, killing nearly everyone. After the attack, Woods finds Allie and decides to take her in. As the two of them walk along the road, Woods discovers hundreds of dead spiders scattered around the floor. He then playfully lifts Allie up onto his shoulders and runs off just before Kumanga erupts from the ground. And don't get too excited, because this is the only time that giant spider actually appears in this comic. I have no idea why they bothered to include Kumanga, if this is all it does, other than they just wanted to continue the pointless foreshadowing of animals dying off when a new monster appears. In Washington, President Ogden hosts a rally where he reveals the construction of a superweapon being built in Detroit with Michigan's assistance that would be used to put an end to the monster threat and also provide new jobs. Mecha Godzilla. Sometime later, the robotic doppelganger is unveiled and is sent to South Dakota as Godzilla destroys Mount Rushmore. The two monsters clash, and it's actually a pretty decently executed fight until Godzilla blasts Mechagodzilla in the back with his breath, where it's revealed that the workers cut corners and made the robot vulnerable in the back like a bunch of twits. This causes Mechagodzilla to short-circuit, leave the battle, and rampage in Atlanta, Georgia. Elsewhere, Woods and Allie sit around a campfire where Wood reveals that he carries a hand-cranked device that is used to detect large enemy forces and also works in finding out if giant monsters are nearby. This information doesn't fall on to deaf ears as a group of thugs try to steal it, only for Woods to absolutely floor them. Within an unknown eastern mountain formation, a monk reads over ancient text that describes a sacrifice to become one with a dragon as a snake slithers across one of the pages. The monk then climbs up a stairway littered with the corpses of hundreds of dead snakes, and we all know what that means. A new monster! At the cost of his life, he performs a ritual and awakens the three-headed golden dragon, King Ghidorah. Once again, I do not like the art style used here. The design is based on the GMK suit, But that took me so long to figure out because of how alarmingly sharp and jagged the features are portrayed in this style in comparison to the softer appearance of the real suit. I get that they wanted to make King Ghidorah menacing, but there were 3 other King Ghidorah suits that they could have used at the time. We then return to Allie and Woods. Woods watches as a supply plane flies by and asks for Allie to wait for him as he contends with a group of survivors waiting for the supply drop. The survivors break into a fight, completely unaware of Woods getting away with quite the haul and getting back to Allie. We later then see more of the relationship the two of them have as Woods calms Allie down after waking from a nightmare and gives her a chocolate bar. There aren't a lot of characters that really connect with each other in the series, but it is kind of wholesome how gentle and considerate Woods is to Allie, such as the moment he carried her on his back, or making up a game where she closed her eyes whenever Woods got into a fight. It's just a shame that this is the only positive interaction between any of the main characters, because I honestly would have loved to have seen Woods eventually form more healthy relationships. Then again, it seems that everyone Woods comes across is only out to steal and fight, so I guess all he ever saw was the worst of humanity. Anyway, the two of them leave with an unassuming Anguirus lumbering in the distance. Back in Paris, the twins have an encounter with Rodan, who completely interrupts their talk about how they're queens with no one to rule. At this point, Batra finally emerges from his cocoon and battles against Rodan. Batra seems to handle himself pretty well until Rodan shreds one of the moth's wings with his claws. Minette and Mallory command the monsters to stop, and to their surprise, they learn that they could now control both Rodan and Batra. With 2 kaiju under their influence, they decide to fly to America, find Godzilla, and take control of him. Godzilla makes his way through Washington, D.C., and is confronted by King Ghidorah. Oh boy, we're 7 issues in, and it just left off on a cliffhanger. This is gonna be epic. I'm so excited. I'm pumped. Oh, come on! So yeah, instead of starting the 8th issue off with a battle between Godzilla and Ghidorah, we are now in Alabama, where Allie's playing with a motorbike as Wood is beating the shit out of a biker gang. Thankfully, the fight is brief, and the two leave the scene with Allie now wearing a pair of biker goggles. Then, the battle finally gets underway as Godzilla and Ghidorah throw down, the Monster King blasting his atomic breath, and Ghidorah firing his gravity beams, and God damn it! Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? How many of these stupid-ass fights between Woods and random survivors are we going to see? We get it! People are pieces of shit. Stop taking us away from the epic monster fight! After Woods breaks the guy's nose, he and Allie rest for a moment, only for a snake to bite Woods. Allie bandages his wound, and he tells her that some snakes can cause hallucinations. After a quick search on the internet, I can confirm that this is not complete bullshit, as some vipers can inject venom that cause hallucinations. What is complete bunk is that there are at least 2 snakes in the world that have this type of venom, the saw-scaled viper and the Russell's viper, neither of which are native to the United States or even North America, so how the hell is one of them here? As the two of them continue their trek to Who Gives a Shit land, Godzilla and Ghidorah continue their fight with both sides being evenly matched, until Godzilla seemingly ends the battle with what I assume is a nuclear pulse, causing a mushroom cloud explosion. Wow, what an underwhelming fight. This issue really pulled a Gareth Edwards on us before Gareth Edwards directed Godzilla 2014. Steven manages to reactivate Mechagodzilla and learns how to operate its controls, and just in time too, because Anguirus is now on the way. At the same time, President Ogden and his assistants have moved underground, running the country in a secure area. One of the assistants informs the President about Mechagodzilla's reactivation and attempts to set up communication with the pilot. The battle seems to be going in Mechagodzilla's favor at first, before Anguirus manages to overpower the giant robot, only managing to defeat the Earth Dragon after Woods found the robot's shoulder missiles. While one of the monsters is finally down and out, there is no time to celebrate as one of Mechagodzilla's computers senses Godzilla nearby. Wanting to avenge the deaths of his parents, Woods sets a course to the King of the Monsters for a rematch. The President manages to make contact with the Mecha and orders Woods to return Mechagodzilla for repairs, but he disobeys the direct order as he finally comes face to face with Godzilla. Mechagodzilla completely dominates Godzilla, but the battle catches the attention of Minette and Mallory, and it doesn't take long for Ghidorah to join the fray. Now having to face against 2 opposing forces, Ogden informs Woods to activate Mechagodzilla's plasma grenade. With a single blast, Mechagodzilla is able to bring down Godzilla and King Ghidorah, ending the fight. After the President and Woods make amends with each other, Woods flies Mechagodzilla to Detroit. But it's not a happy ending just yet. Shortly after the battle ends, the twins land and stand by Godzilla with Batra and Rodan as the king of the monsters wakes up. Wasting no time, the twins attempt to gain control of Godzilla's mind. But it doesn't seem to work, and it also appears that Godzilla is unable to get up. The pair of them then decide to use Rodan to drop Godzilla onto a nuclear power plant and Batra's prism beams to make an explosion. The nuclear energy completely reconstitutes Godzilla's energy levels, and the twins attempt to control him once again. But we all know Godzilla isn't someone's bitch, and he fires his atomic breath, blasting them off of Batra. Both of the mind-controlled kaiju proceed to fight against Godzilla, with Rodan being defeated very quickly. With Rodan unable to fight, Batra gets into a beam lock with Godzilla, resulting in an explosion that ends the battle with a double KO. With the monsters now unconscious, civilization slowly begins to rebuild itself. Mechagodzilla is under repairs in Detroit, and humanity begins to learn how to live in a world where monsters walk among them. The comic ends on the moon where Space Godzilla watches an oblivious Earth completely unaware of what's to come. I'll be honest, Kingdom of Monsters is not a very good entry in the series, and I can see why some people don't exactly hold this entry in the franchise in high regard. All the problems it has constantly reappear in the form of people making very poor decisions that result in just dire consequences. I normally don't comment on much of the human characters in kaiju media, but Kingdom of Monsters is a human-heavy story, and they're very unintelligent, stereotypical, or just not at all that likable. I also wasn't really rooting for Woods or Allie as the two main leads of the characters. Woods was introduced much later than he should have been, and his whole character is that he basically hates everyone except an orphan girl he rescued. I also found issues with how the civilians responded to the kaiju threat. It's no secret that in some situations people will get desperate and stoop to the levels of stealing and fighting, but I think that wouldn't fully accurate display how every person would be. I would have loved to have seen survivors come together to help each other, to show the good of humanity, and not just the wicked and the evil. And it seems like they were going to get something like that with the two survivors that found girly Yaya's body until they were unceremoniously killed. I may be misreading this, but another thing I wanted to briefly touch on is that the first half of the series seems to be saturated with political satire. I won't talk much about it, but I honestly wasn't interested in that subplot, and it didn't really go anywhere in the end. Also, I feel like there were a lot of unnecessary inclusions, like Kumanga and the sudden deaths of various animals. For Godzilla, it made sense because in previous material, fish either disappeared or died in massive numbers whenever he was around. But with the others, I just don't understand it. And it goes completely unexplained as to why this phenomenon occurred, and I really didn't like how many times the comic cut away from the battle against Godzilla and King Ghidorah, with moments of Wood and Allie. I think it may have been a better idea to keep the A and B plot of that issue separate to give each other the due time they needed. And on the subject of kaiju, I'm not a fan of the art style or a majority of the kaiju designs. The only really good designs to come out of this comic, in my opinion, were Batra's larva and Amargo forms, and Mechagodzilla. I can still clearly tell what monsters they're meant to be, but the art is so rough looking that it doesn't do a lot of the creatures justice. With all this added together, I give Godzilla Kingdom of Monsters 2 footprints out of 5. A very poor first impression of the IDW Godzilla trilogy. But we're not done with IDW yet. I mentioned earlier in the video that we'd be talking about one of the strongest incarnations of Godzilla in all of media. And we're definitely on the right track as we'll see the IDW iteration of the character pull truly amazing feats later in the series. In May 2012, IDW released the first issue of the second entry in the trilogy, Godzilla Ongoing. I sincerely hope you all enjoyed this video. This is the first time I've ever reviewed a comic book series, so I'm still relatively new to the game. You guys have heard my opinion, but I'd like to know what your thoughts are on Godzilla Kingdom of Monsters. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe today, hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything new. All my links are in the link tree in the description down below, and until next time, this is Tyranno Senpai signing off. Alright then, take care now. Bye bye then.